Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We've got folks just joining us here as I'm speaking, so we're going to wait just a moment to get our webinar started today. We will kick us off here in about a minute, so go ahead and get joined, get your audio on, and we will start momentarily. Still have people very actively joining, so welcome if you're just hopping in. We're going to start here in about 30 seconds. I can see people still getting into the room here, so want to give just a few more seconds for everyone to get in, and then we will get started with today's session. So hang tight for another half a minute, and we will start shortly. All right. I still see people joining, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We're about a minute past the top of the hour here, so we're going to jump right in. I want to welcome you today and thank you for joining today's session, which is entitled Flexible and Scalable Approaches to Project-Based Learning. I want to thank our friends at Cal who helped us to get this session together. So if you learned of this session from Cal, then welcome. We're looking forward to an engaging session here today. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in to cover our agenda and the different topical areas that we're going to cover, and then we will get right into our content. We're going to start. I'm going to introduce myself here in a moment, as well as my colleague Eleanor Buxton. But we're going to start after introductions with sort of a high level of why are we here? What is the challenge that we are looking to solve? And then get into the solution to that challenge that we're going to talk about is project-based learning. And so we're going to talk about different ways in which project-based learning can be utilized, show you then examples of those different ways in which project-based learning can be used in action with some of our different partners here at Ripen, then cover some of the basics of how Ripen works. So after we tell you some stories about different ways in which Ripen is used, we will get into the nuts and bolts of how that actually comes to life on the Ripen platform. And then we will wrap with some of the impacts and outcomes that we've been able to demonstrate with different of our partners and some of the testimonials and data that we've been able to collect. We will leave some time at the end for Q&A. To that end, if you have questions as we go, please use the Q&A feature here in Zoom. We have the chat disabled, so we will not really be taking a look at that. That's difficult to monitor as we go. So please do use that Q&A, and then we'll be able to go back and try to answer as many of those questions that come in at the end as time allows. So just to kick us off here with introductions, I am Josh Mitchell. I'm Vice President of Academic Partnerships at Ripen. I'm joined by my colleague, Eleanor Buxton, who is our Senior Manager of Solutions Architecture. She is going to cover a lot of those stories that I just spoke about, the different flexible models in action. She's going to tell you about a lot of those. I'm going to kick us off with sort of framing the challenge and then tell more about how Ripen works after Eleanor covers some of those models. So going to start here with some data. This is data that many in higher education are probably familiar with. This comes from the Talent Disrupted report, which came out now about a year and a half ago, the most recent version from Strata and Burning Glass. And really what this speaks to is the incidence of underemployment in US higher education and the real persistent problem of underemployment when graduates are not able to land a job that required the degree they earned immediately after college. So 52% of four-year graduates are underemployed a year after they graduate. And you can see then that when a recent graduate starts their career underemployed, they often remain underemployed a decade out. So it is really critical then that undergraduates are able to land a first job that is putting to use the degree that they earned, because that sets them on a pathway for success in their career. And when they don't, those rates of underemployment often persist at very high levels. One of the recommendations from that Talent Disrupted report, in terms of how to make sure that graduates are not underemployed after graduating, is around internships, and the importance of internships in helping graduates to land a great first job. This is some data now from the Business Higher Education Forum. This is released about a year ago, last fall. And this shows that while there was very high demand for internships, 8.2 million students in this data set that indicated they were looking for an internship, less than half were actually able to secure one. There was also in this particular report some criteria around what they termed a quality internship. And so about 2/3 of those that landed internships were ones that they considered to be quality. And so what you can see here is that there's a major gap. From the Talent Disrupted report, a recommendation that if we want to eliminate underemployment, we need more internships, but there simply is not enough supply of internships to meet the demand that students already have today. So we have to find then other ways in which to get students experience to make sure that they avoid that rut of underemployment. There are a lot of different ways in which students can get experience, and that's really what this slide is showing. So internships are just one form of experiential learning. Not going to cover a lot of what's going on in this slide, other than to say that there's a lot of research out there about different forms of experiential learning, different forms of work integrated learning. There are taxonomies of how to define these different kinds. But what we're really going to focus on today is project-based learning, which touches on different elements. Eleanor is going to speak about different ways in which project-based learning is utilized within the Ripen ecosystem, which in some cases makes it more akin to some of these other kinds of models. But project-based learning is, we believe here at Ripen, a very flexible and very scalable way to get experience to students and try to help overcome that underemployment problem. Just some additional data to help indicate sort of the demand that exists for this type of project-based and work integrated learning. This is some data from Wiley. This is now a couple of years old that really just indicates students want this. They want these kinds of real project-based opportunities within their coursework, not just external, not just co-curricular, but they're looking for opportunities to apply what they're learning in the curriculum to work on real projects. And from this same report, this is no surprise, of course, but the number of institutions offering those is not keeping up with the demand. And the last bit here, this again is some data that comes from Strata. This is now just making the case for, why is project-based learning so impactful? This is some data that shows the real earning delta for students that have gotten these opportunities versus those that have not as part of their undergraduate studies. So the data is quite clear that project-based learning has a real material impact on students' earnings, on their own perception of the value of their education. And as I said, it's a way in which to help bridge that gap of the numbers of students that are looking for experience by way of an internship and not getting it. And so that's where we'll transition over to talk about how we sort of bring that to life here at Ripen. Ripen's been in business for about a decade, and from the start, our mission has been around eliminating underemployment. So the data that is out there on underemployment illuminates how important this is, but that really is what we have sought to address here at Ripen right from the start, where our co-founders were looking at their own educational journeys and their opportunity to do co-op in Canada, but seeing that not all of their colleagues and peers had those opportunities. And so looked at what are other ways in which we can get students real experience as part of their studies. And that is really where Ripen was born out of. And the project-based format we're going to talk about was the solution. I think I've already made this point a few times, but really what project-based learning, the way that Ripen facilitates it, represents is a very flexible and very scalable way. That flexibility is really the point of today's webinar, the different ways in which it can be employed, both inside and outside of the curriculum. But it is a way to really scale these kinds of opportunities more cost effectively, quite frankly, than internships. Internships are great, but are very cost prohibitive to scale significantly. And so this is really where the Ripen model is a great fit. And before I turn it over to Eleanor to really talk about some of those flexible ways in which we are facilitating these project-based learning experiences, I just want to give some context for the scope of work that Ripen has been doing. I said that we've been doing this now for about a decade. You see a lot of the logos here on the screen of schools that we've worked with. But one of the points that I want to emphasize is that a lot of the work we've done to date has been working with faculty. You see the number here, 11,000 educators on this screen. We've worked with those 11,000 and more faculty members to help them embed work-based learning, project-based learning into the curriculum. And that has been very successful in helping us to deliver now close to 300,000 individual student experiences. But what we're really going to talk about today are other approaches to be able to give students project-based learning experiences that don't rely on being able to find a course and a faculty member that's willing to do it, which are terrific when they can be done, but are also prohibitive to truly scaling these kinds of experiences for students. So that's really the jumping point where I am going to turn it over to Eleanor and allow her to begin speaking about some of these other applications for project-based learning.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Josh. It's great to be with you folks today. So part of my work at Ripen does include leading our partnership with Kale, which is the Build Better Careers program. But then I also support a range of partners in workforce development and higher ed to explore these various applications of project-based learning, aligning them back to our partners and their learners and their bigger strategic goals. So as Josh mentioned, this can look like working with faculty to embed project-based learning into a course. Sometimes we're finding ways to meet students where they are at. And so we're having direct paths to drive impact with learners outside of the classroom. In other models, we might be bringing together local industry partners and alumni as project providers, and then we're hosting engagements, which then have really reciprocal value for the students and the institution's wider community. We might also be striving to build a connected system where different models are combined, thinking about combining curricula and co-curricula to maximize that reach across a campus or across a student population. So I'm going to walk through a selection of these here in just a little bit more detail, and we've seen huge success in all of these and various combinations. And then I'll dive into some more specific models that we've kind of got stories of their action to share. So thinking about scaling that project-based learning, we're often seeing partners combining several options, and certain models might resonate more with different areas of study, different student population demographics, or specific learning outcomes for a specific population of your learners. So on the left here, you have that curriculum embedded project, which Josh mentioned, where experiential learning is part of a student's course. And here, the team at Ripen will work with faculty to augment the course delivery to design that project-based experience, incorporating models of assessment and reflective practice. And students are then completing that employer project for course credit. And this can show up differently depending on the discipline area and the learner group. We have, some impactful partnerships where project experiences maybe 15 to 20 hours per learner, right up to capstone projects at 100 hours per learner or more. But there are then these other models that we've seen a lot of success with pilots over the last few years now. So the second one here is stacking certificate projects with aligned employer projects. And so this really provides a more comprehensive learning experience for students so that they're completing that certificate and then almost immediately translating those acquired skills into project delivery with a partner in real quick succession. In the middle there, we have several partners now who are running kind of standalone credit-bearing internship courses. So these could be 3-credit, 5-credit courses, for example, offering learners the opportunity to work on an industry project that's really pertinent to their program of study. We also have other partners thinking about bringing together interdisciplinary student groups. So allowing this to become an open enrollment elective course and having students from across a community come together to work with employers. And then on the far right there, there's various approaches to workforce development, co-curricular or extracurricular engagements, meeting that learner demand for career-connected learning. Some of these programs might be paid opportunities, or we might be running them in partnership with student leaders through student clubs, for example. So now we're going to take a look at some of those models in action, how we co-create them with our partners, the various design choices that we've been making before we then facilitate that end-to-end project-based experience in the Ripen platform. So I'm going to start with our partners at the University of Virginia and their Career Academies program. So here, the team at UVA's Office of Online Education and Digital Innovation, they are doing that stacked model where they're stacking prepaid access to Google certificates with aligned employer projects. Employer projects are sourced and scoped against the certificate areas. And then we run a combined program. We ran one in January and one in the summer, where students are taking the required modules from the certificate and then putting that into practice with an employer project. The program was first piloted with 50 participants in January before doubling in size for the summer cohort that we wrapped up a couple of months ago now. And here you will see the Ripen Experience page. So this is the call to action for our participating employer partners. In this program, we had students completing those certificates in data, digital marketing, business, and web development, before then working in teams of 5 with small business owners. We also had a project management track. So those students completed the Google AI Agile Project Management certificate. And they were then assigned across teams. So each team had a dedicated project manager, somebody who loved project management work to drive them forward through their project towards the final deliverables. And for the Career Academies program, students are recruited through student groups and clubs on grounds at UVA and from the athletics department at UVA. This has been a hugely popular approach because it's super flexible and really an accessible experience. Both elements of the program, so the certificate and the project, can be fitted around students' other commitments to their studies or their athletics program, for example. And learners have really valued working with their team and their peers, flexing those durable skills, and then having a powerful demonstration of career preparedness that they can then talk about, add to their portfolio to unlock kind of the next opportunities for them, whether they might be in education or employment. And moving now across the country to our partners at Calbright College in California. Calbright College serves predominantly adult learners through their competency-based model with a really intentional focus on workforce development. And so they are designing programs to prepare learners to enter growing fields across multiple sectors in the economy. And this year we partnered with them to launch Calbright Career Bridge, which is a paid micro-internship program, offering learners the opportunity to complete that internship at the completion of their Calbright College course. So participants are gaining that real-world experience aligned to their course, in this case in cybersecurity, data analytics, and human resources, and then there is a $1,000 stipend paid to the learner at the completion of their internship. And you can see on the Ripen Experience page here, so our team has worked with Calbright College to curate this Ripen Experience page. And this program has a regional requirement for participating employers. They must be in the state of California. And by connecting learners with local employers, we're enhancing capacity for those small businesses in the region. We're expanding learners' social capital as they engage with their local community. And ultimately, we're facilitating those career transitions. And I think there's two other pieces that are really central to why this program has been such a success. The first is mentorship. And so our team at Ripen have worked really closely with our partners at Calbright to provide mentorship both to learners in navigating project collaborations with their peers and with their employer partner, but also providing technical mentorship on some of the project content itself. The second thing I think is really valuable to call out here is also the payments involved in this program. So the program is fully funded, and so it's reducing barriers to entry both for the learners and for the employers when you think about comparing that to a traditional internship program. And the learners are paid directly through the program. And so we're able to leverage a whole suite of Ripen platform features, including time tracking through work logs, invoices, handling the payments directly through the platform, to really just reduce friction for our partners and for the employers and provide a really seamless and inclusive experience for those participants. The program has served 75 learners in its first year, and planning is underway for significant expansion as we move into continuing with those discipline areas, but also adding additional discipline areas over the next couple of years. And now moving to Western Governors University, I wanted to showcase two models that are working in parallel here with different groups at the institution. So the first is with career services, and this program responds just to learner demand for these kinds of opportunities to take part in real world projects that are between 20 and 40 hours. The program is competitive, and so students apply to career services, and they then select the top applicants to take part in the program. Those learners are onboarded into Ripen, and the program here really instills a lot of learner agency. And so learners choose their own project partner from a list of pre-vetted employers, and they're choosing the type of project that they want to work on. These are individual internships, and so learners are responsible for their own deliverables to the employer. But there are some team elements, as multiple students can be working with that same employer. And so this program is clearly meeting that demand. The career services team at WGU received twice the amount of applicants the first time around for the number of spots that we had. And so there was a real we were meeting a real need for students to be able to take this kind of opportunity as a co-curricular alongside their time studying at WGU. And then the second type of programming that we're running here is curriculum embedded project-based learning in the WGU Academy. And so here, predominantly, again, adult learners are completing a capstone project, which is integrated into a digital marketing certificate. There are 5 courses in the certificate, and then the Ripen Employer Project is that 5th and final course. And again, for our learner participants here, they're getting that course credit to complete their certificate, but also a real opportunity at portfolio development when you think about a digital marketing deliverable that's going to a real employer partner. And in terms of assessment here, the employer project is assessed through a combination of the employer feedback and the employer skills validation, which is collected directly through the Ripen platform, and a student reflection exercise. So those pieces come together to assess that final course of the certificate program. And then the last example that we wanted to highlight today comes from Providence College. We have partnered with them to deliver curricular project-based learning for a while now. And then we've adopted a more direct-to-student approach. And so here we are empowering student clubs to design and run their own project-based learning experience. And so it is the Friars Consulting Group at Providence College, which then connects undergraduate students with businesses and nonprofits to really solve real organizational challenges. Students collaborate in teams to conduct research, analyze data, and then produce actionable recommendations for their business partner. And what I really like about this project-based learning experience is if we look at the Ripen experience page here, we've really focused on community and student agency. So the student club leaders have been in the driving seat of this program. They've worked with our team here at Ripen to scope out what is their ideal employer partner, what does their ideal project look like, and then that student leader is actually meeting with and shortlisting employers before making the final project matches. We've also expanded the kind of community connection in this program with student teams being paired with an alumni of the college, providing mentorship and guidance as they're working on their project. So there's a nice additional layer there of learning and also network building for the participants taking part in this program. So hopefully this snapshot has inspired some thinking around how you could adapt and curate project-based learning experiences for the learners and the communities that you serve, and also how a combination of these various models can accelerate and also diversify the impact that you're looking to achieve. I'm now going to pass this back to Josh to share more about how you can get started using Ripen and bring these kind of opportunities to your learners.
Hi, thanks, Eleanor. And I think the audience is eager to learn more about how this works. There's a lot of questions coming in about as you were sharing some of those different programs, how exactly they get posted, how the employer side works. So that's what we're going to cover next is the nuts and bolts of how we facilitate these kinds of experiences at Ripen. So if you've asked those kinds of questions, we are going to begin to address them now. And I will put in just a quick reminder that if you do have additional questions, there's a lot of questions that have come in, others that we'll table and we'll put a pin in to come back during our Q&A session at the end here. But please use that Q&A feature rather than the chat. So drop those in the Q&A, and that helps us keep better order over what those are and make sure we can answer as many as we can. So to get right into this in terms of how Ripen works, I'll break this this down into 3 different buckets, and then I'll show you some screenshots of how this actually looks and appears on Ripen and how we facilitate this through these different processes. It really starts with a marketplace component where we are helping in any of these kinds of programs to put out on one side of the marketplace what amounts to the call for projects. So there is a page, which I'll show you some examples of here in a moment. And the screenshots that Eleanor was showing you were other examples of what we call on Ripen an experience. That is what is articulating the requirements for the particular program or course, what kinds of projects are going to be a good fit. If there is a geographic requirement, like the Calbright College one had to be in California, as Eleanor was pointing out, all of those kinds of things. And that goes out to one side of the marketplace. The other side of the marketplace is where the employers live with their projects. So there is an experience marketplace, there is a project marketplace. We have 44,000 and growing companies on the Ripen platform that are posting projects all the time. And essentially then what we do is we facilitate matching between those two sides. And I'll explain more of how that works here as I'm speaking. But that matching to find good fit projects that meet the requirements, that's a central part to what the Ripen platform facilitates. Once those projects are matched, that is where then the project management and collaboration tools come into play. So there's a suite of features to really help to oversee these projects that are going on at scale from the educator standpoint or the program manager standpoint, to be able to monitor the progress of students, to make sure they're on track, to be able to collect feedback as projects are going on, and also for students to be able to stay on track, to give them a place where they can be interacting with their industry partner, but also progressing through milestones that might be created. And I'll show you some examples of how that looks here in a moment as well. And with all of these different kinds of experiences going on, potentially dozens of projects in a particular scenario. Some of the ones that Eleanor showed, there were 18 projects that each had multiple teams, for example, the one at the University of Virginia that she was speaking about. Being able to collect systematic data about these experiences, what kinds of impacts they're having on whether it is career clarity, career confidence, development of skills, and or if it's closer to the time of graduation, on actual employment. All of those kinds of things. The Ripen platform gives you an ability to collect that kind of data at any point during the project journey, including before a project begins, after a project begins, as well as feedback from employers themselves. So I'm going to show you some examples of that as well, and then Eleanor is going to close us out with some of the examples of the kinds of data that we are collecting from these different programs that we're running. But that's a big part of the Ripen platform, as well as is giving you a systematic way to collect this kind of data and then report on it. Just to walk through what an individual experience, whether it's a course or whether it's an individual, student club group like Eleanor was touching on, it sort of progresses through what we call here the Ripen moments. That begins with planning what that experience is going to look like and getting that page, several examples of which Eleanor showed you, published and out to one side of that marketplace as I was just describing. We are then actively sourcing and helping to match projects that are going to be a good fit. Sometimes that is very easy. There are already projects published on the project side of our marketplace that are ready to go. And then we just need to confirm expectations with an employer, make sure they're well prepared to participate, and we have a match. In other cases, we have to go find projects that are going to be a good fit because we don't have enough on our platform. And so that involves marketing to new companies to come sign up. That involves re-engaging companies that might already be on Ripen, but they don't have a project today. And so the sourcing and matching go hand in hand, but that is happening during usually about an 8 to 10 week window between when the experience gets published and when students are going to begin their project. And our team is really doing the heavy lifting there to make sure that at the end of the day, if you want 10 projects that meet certain requirements, we are getting those for you. Once then those projects are matched, there are several things that Ripen is doing to help make sure that those projects are going to be successful. We are helping the students to get formed into their groups, to get their projects successfully kicked off. We do live onboarding, for example, with our partners to make sure that students know how to use the platform, can get introduced to their industry partner, and begin their project. Once those projects now have been successfully kicked off, there are several tools that I'll show you and features that allow you to really keep tabs on how they're doing, tools to keep them on track as I've been describing, And that then progresses to the end of the project where they're actually submitting their work, they're getting feedback, and you then, as an institution, are able to be reporting on the aggregate of what's going on and the impacts that it's having. So that's really what the flow looks like from start to finish. This is what a portal on Ripen looks like. So you saw screenshots earlier from the University of Virginia, which is up here in the top right, of an individual experience. But what you're looking at now is what it looks like at a more portal level, where each of these tiles, these different colored tiles, are those individual experiences. So if I were an administrator at an institution using Ripen, this is what I would see, where I can see the different courses and programs going on in a single place. And then when I click into one of these, that's where I see the details of what those individual project requirements are and whatnot. That is what is going out into the marketplace to attract those good fit projects. The matchmaking process, as I've been describing, involves two sides basically coming together to facilitate good fit matches. And so what you see here on the lower left is what the experience marketplace looks like. I know these icons are small, but each of those that you can see there on the left are individual courses or other kinds of experiences that have been published by any number of our partners. What an employer would do is engage in that side of the marketplace to search by category, to look through different experiences. And when they find one that they think is a good fit, their call to action is to submit a project to that experience for their consideration. And we, again, are driving activity to those experience pages to make sure we have enough matches in basically marketing, as I was describing before. Then in the top right is the project side of the marketplace, and that is where a project that has been published by a company is available there to also be discovered either by an educator or, in most cases, by us. We are basically shopping that side of the marketplace on behalf of our partners to do some pre-vetting and identification of potential good fits to then work with those to determine, are they going to meet the requirements? Are they going to meet the expectations that have been set? So that's what that side of the marketplace looks like, is literally project scopes that have been created by the companies that are active on Ripen. Once that matching is done, and as I've described, we are really facilitating that. We are doing a lot of the pre-vetting. We are bringing projects that look like they're a potential good fit to our educator partners, our program managers, reviewing them with them in an iterative kind of way, getting their feedback, what's right, what's not, so that we can ultimately get those matched and ready to go. Now, once that has happened and the projects have begun, that's where the collaboration tools and the ability to maintain oversight over these projects comes into play. And so what you're looking at now on the right here, this is what a typical dashboard would look like from the perspective of a faculty member or a program manager who is overseeing multiple projects, multiple teams in those projects. In fact, what you're looking at here are multiple groups all working on the same project. You see the same logo there for this company. And then what I see in these columns are the different milestones that students are progressing through as they complete their projects. And you're able to see a progress bar of, have they completed it? In some of these cases, they might be things like surveys that students have to do individually. And so that's where these blue progress bars are showing that in some cases, one or two students have done it and the others have not. So in a single view, what you're able to see is how all of these groups are tracking against the milestones and different kinds of deliverables that have been set. There can be flags here so that as the Ripen team is also monitoring these projects alongside the educator or the program coordinator, we can flag things that they might need to go look at and say, this team doesn't look like they're on track. You might want to check in and see if they need some help, those kinds of things. But this basically serves as a way to really prioritize, which groups might need help or which ones look like they're on track and I don't really need to worry about them so much. This is what that really represents. Whereas that's the more macro view of what's going on in all of these projects. What I'm looking at now is more of a micro view. So from a student's standpoint, there was a question, by the way, in the chat about LMS integration. Students will often access out of the LMS, even if it's not something that's a course. I know in a lot of the cases that Eleanor just went through, there might still be a course shell added for that co-curricular experience to the LMS, and that would be the place where students are accessing from. That's most common, where they would go into that course shell, they would click the Ripen activity or the assignment, and then they are getting single sign-on into the Ripen platform, where they are then seeing the project description and the milestones that have been created for them to work through. And that's what we're looking at now. Is they have a project description here. I know. Again, this is a little bit hard to see, but it shows that they've completed 7 tasks, and there are then additional tasks for them to complete. So if this were a live demo and I could click into that drop button, then what you would see are those individual tasks where I could then go in and see the specific work that is required of me, or access a specific survey and check those off as I go. So that's from a student standpoint, what this looks like. There's also the ability for them to schedule meetings with their industry partner here, to communicate with their industry partner and with their group. And from the standpoint of the faculty or the program manager, all of that is accessible to you. So when these projects are going on, rather than saying to students that are working with a company, please CC me on your emails when you're communicating with the company, all of that is here and indexed for you as your source of truth for what's going on in these projects. So that is another one of the ways in which the Ripen platform makes it easier to be able to facilitate scaling this kind of work. And I wanna wrap here with getting toward the end, and talking about feedback and what students are really getting, in addition to the experience itself, which is very valuable, but what they're getting that they can now go put on their LinkedIn profile or on their CV. And that is one of those one of those things is endorsement of skill. And so I want to touch on an integration we have first with Lightcast, where we integrate with their open skills taxonomy. The feedback part of that I just mentioned, I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a moment. But important to know is that skills are from the Lightcast taxonomy, show up in several places on Ripen to really help facilitate finding good matches, for one thing. So there are skills associated with experiences, there are skills associated with projects, and some of the AI that's built into the platform is simply comparing those things to make recommendations on, is this a potential good fit? That's what you see in the middle here, for example, based on comparing the skills that are associated with each. Where that really then comes to life is when students are getting endorsement of skill, it is against that Lightcast open skills taxonomy. So they're really getting employer validation against an industry standard taxonomy. And that's what we're going to see here now. This is a learner's profile. These little blue bubbles are all skills. So when they are getting feedback from an industry partner, that industry partner is picking skills from the Lightcast taxonomy that the learner has demonstrated. And that's where they can then put that on their profile. They can export that to LinkedIn in the form of a certificate. And that's the real tangible thing that a student gets to make their resume more attractive, to increase their employability. They get instructions on how to put that on their LinkedIn profile. It goes in under the certificates area of their profile. So that endorsement of skill and the real feedback itself is what is very impactful to a student in making them more employable when they've completed one of these projects. So that is another good segue to talk about impact and outcome at a more macro level. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Eleanor, who's going to walk through a few examples of this.
Thanks, Josh. As Josh mentioned, we're going to just share a little bit of the impact and the outcomes of these models, and share some stories directly from our learner participants. So under Kale's leadership, the Build Better Careers program, which is funded by the Truist Foundation, was launched to strengthen career pathways and pathways towards jobs that lead to economic mobility. And the initiative focuses on cities and regions where in-demand jobs remain unfilled, and greater collaboration across workforce and education can strengthen those career pathways. And so Ripen's engagement in the Build Better Careers program is through project-based learning, and we have current partnerships with Florida International University, the University of Memphis, and UNC Charlotte. And we're seeing some really wonderful results from the first couple of years of Ripen experiences in Build Better Careers. And this, again, as Josh mentioned, is collated through our survey tools within the platform. And after completing their employer project, 96% of learners feel that they've practiced and expanded on those skills that they had learned in the classroom. 84% feel confident that this experience will increase their earning potential, and 83% feel better equipped to reach their career goals as a result of this employer collaboration. Looking now at our flagship workforce development program in Canada. So through Level Up, it's a federally funded program, and learners complete 60-hour paid micro-internships. And we've now delivered over 30,000 learner experiences over the past 4 years through the Level Up program. And from post-program data collection in the months and years after learners are completing this project, we're seeing that improving that employability at the end of the project is reliably leading to positive employment outcomes down the line for those participants. And so around 3/4 of the learners in this program are going on to receive direct, so that's with the partner that they work within the program, or indirect employment offers with new employer connections by leveraging their project-based learning experience on that next step in their career journey. And so we're really seeing that the results bear out immediately for students in that increased career clarity and down the line as they're navigating, in this case, their early careers and moving on into employment. And looking back now at the Career Academies program at UVA, it's clear to us that pairing that certificate with an employer project is allowing learners to enhance their technical skills, but also those durable skills of communication, professionalism, and creativity. The program is really highly recommended by students to their peers. You see that on the far right there. And that speaks to its doubling in size between the first and the second cohort. And lastly, I'll give you just a second to see some 3 student testimonials that really just tell the impact of this experience on the student journey, showing that this experience feels transformative. It's providing clarity on, career direction and what that looks like. And it's also, I really like the testimonial on the far right here. Working with a small business, the majority of our employer partners are small to medium-sized businesses, and this allows learners to drive real and lasting impact for a company, and they see that impact come to life for the business that they have partnered with. And then finally, this is a part of our mid-program impact snapshot for the Career Bridge program with Calbright College. And this shows how we can use our surveying tools within the platform to capture pre and post outcomes for learners. And we're seeing here that the program is increasing learners' kind of sense of their career pathway, where they're heading next, and also their confidence in applying the skills that they've just gained in the classroom into real life applications. And then a couple of other really wonderful testimonials there. Just with the local focus of this program, we're really enhancing those regional networks, and learners are acknowledging that the theory was not enough, and it's the application of the theory that's going to be transformative for them in their next steps. And then as we wrap here, this is just another example of a learner profile on the Ripen platform. One of our Calbright Career Bridge students, you can see their full curated digital profile, that skills validation that Josh spoke about, and an employer written feedback, an employer testimonial, all of those skills that have been called out and validated by the employer, and a digital badge there that has been awarded to this learner for participating in the program. And as Josh mentioned, this then becomes a real invaluable resource for this learner as they're navigating what their next steps, whatever they might be. So I'll pass us back to Josh now as we just wrap up, and then we'll have plenty of time to take any questions.
All right. Yeah, there's a lot of great questions coming in, and we've got about 15 minutes here to be able to answer as many as we can. So please go ahead and continue to submit them. I've been reading them as Eleanor has been covering impacts and outcomes here over the last couple of minutes. There's a lot of themes that I'm going to try to draw into rather than read a specific question necessarily and answer it. I'm going to sort of draw them together thematically. So I'm going to start with, there's a few questions going back to the description of how Ripen works and who creates the experience page, for example. There were questions about I think there was a question about a micro internship versus another internship, and so I'm going to cover some of that in a single attempt, I suppose. So really, that experience page is created by Ripen in consultation with our partner, where we are, if it's course embedded, often that entails getting a syllabus. If it's something that is not course embedded, like these different kinds of examples Eleanor has been covering today, then it often happens with co-design, where we are really speaking about, what are the objectives that you have for this particular project? How much time do you want your students to spend on this project? If it's a project-based internship or something else that you're calling an internship, there may be a very specific number of hours that students need to spend on it. So we don't make any assumptions about which of those terms is most appropriate or what you ought to call it. I think the word micro implies that it's often smaller. But when they are something that is created as an internship kind of experience, especially when they're for credit, then those number of hours often aligns directly with the number of credit hours. So, for example, we have several partners like UNC Charlotte, which is part of the Cal Build Better's career program, that have done one credit internship, project-based internship courses, where those are 45 or 50-hour projects. And then we've done some at the University of Virginia, actually, where they have a three-credit internship program called their internship placement program. And those are then 150-hour projects because that equates to their three credit hours. So those kinds of details depend on what makes sense for the program itself, for the learning objectives, even the things like what size teams are they, or are they going to be individual projects? Those are again determined by the co-creation process and what makes sense. So at WGU, for example, those are students that are studying online or doing so at their own pace. And so what we did is we really co-designed a program with them whereby they are individual projects that students are doing on their own, but there are multiple students doing the same project at the same time. That's happening within a sort of cohort format so that there's structure for an employer partner to know when they're engaging and when they're going to be devoting time. So those are the kinds of things that go into that co-designing process. And then ultimately, that experience page is created by us with the input of our academic partner, and it's published once the academic partner is satisfied that it reflects what they're looking for. So hopefully that answers some of the questions that came up around that topic. If there are additional nuances, feel free to drop those in the chat, but I think I covered a lot of what I saw in some of the questions coming in. Another area where there were several questions, and Eleanor, I'm gonna ask you if you can address this area. There are a few different questions I saw about employers and what our employer marketplace looks like. And I described earlier that we have a team that markets to employers all the time to attract new employers to sign up, and that's often in line with where we need projects. So Ripen is a Canadian company. We have a very large base of employers in Canada because we do a lot of work there. But as we've expanded into the US over the past several years and in specific states, we've recruited more employers in certain geographies like California and the Calbright program. And we have a marketing team whose job it is to do that. But Eleanor, can you speak a little bit more about some of the verticals and the different kinds of projects that we have in high volumes and just what that looks like on the employer side?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And as Josh mentioned, we are balancing a two-sided marketplace. And so as we're working with partners to design programs, in parallel to that, we're expanding and flexing our employer marketplace to match the demand of the programs that are coming in. We have a whole team that support our employer onboarding. We have like marketing campaigns for those employers, but we also run some really intentional community engagement outreach to bring in employer partners, thinking about partnerships with chambers of commerce and various business associations, incubation hubs and things like that, to really bring in strong employer partners. Our employer partners go through an onboarding process with our employer success team here at Ripen that helps them do a couple of things. And there's also a lot of tools in the platform that help them get onboarded. The first thing we're doing is really kind of doing that assessment with them to understand their readiness to engage in project-based learning, making sure they're prepared to engage with student talent, that they understand, our programs might have different commitments around mentorship, around weekly meetings, for example, making sure there's alignment there for the projects to take place. And then secondly, supporting them to scope a good and robust project description. A lot of the employer partners that we work with, they know what business challenges they're working on. They know what the next goal is for them as a business, and we'll work with them to break that down into those projects that have a robust skills anatomy with them, a really clear deliverable framework, and a timeline that is associated with them. And as you saw today, we have a broad variety of programs that are looking for different types of companies in different industries and to work with different demographics of students. And so our team does a lot of work to advise employers on what type of program might be a good fit for them and where they can find a good home within the Ripen ecosystem. In terms of the largest employer verticals, we see the largest projects areas in things like the programs we shared today: digital marketing, data analytics, business and consulting and business proposal designing and things like that, go-to-market strategies and things like that. And also just a big area within tech of cybersecurity, web development, and things like that also. But we also run programs that are specific to liberal arts areas and working with small businesses on partnership strategy, for example, community engagement campaigns and things like that. So we do a lot of work with you to understand what are the skills that your learners are building, what do their destinations look like beyond their education experience, and then match the employer marketplace to what we're thinking of when we're designing that collaboration.
Yeah, that's great, Eleanor. Thank you. And I will add one more point, which is I would say the most common defining feature of employers on the Ripen marketplace is that they tend to be smaller and medium sized. And there's a lot of nonprofits as well. So the project-based format is not only one that is very flexible to fit into a lot of different use cases on an academic side, but it's also a format that lends itself well to those kinds of organizations that may not have the capacity or the resources to take on an intern and properly support them in a more role-based kind of application that many larger organizations do. So the project-based format is a really good fit for SMEs and for nonprofits that have real needs in their organizations and limited ability to engage with students or otherwise to help meet those needs. So that I would say, across all of the other geographical considerations and types of projects is the most common defining feature of employers on the Ripen marketplace. I want to go next to cover a handful of questions that are asking about the skills that are being endorsed, but also more generally just how students' work is being assessed. I think that's kind of how I'll thread these different questions together. Really, in terms of the skill endorsement, it is quite subjective. So an employer that is giving feedback to a student and is endorsing certain skills, they're able to pick. There are recommended skills based on those that were associated with a project that they can say, yes, the student demonstrated these or not. But it is subjective at the end of the day, which ones they choose to include and which ones they do not. In terms of assessment, where I think that subjectivity is relevant to raise in terms of how these experiences might be assessed and or graded, if that's the scenario that you are looking at. Really, we make no assumptions about how that might work. We give a lot of configurability to the kinds of questions you can ask of employers. So if you want to consider employer feedback and how you might assess an experience, you can customize a survey to be deployed to that employer so that they are giving the kind of feedback that you want. We also give you, the tools for collaboration and whatnot that I highlighted really give you a full window into what work has been done, what communication has there been. But we make no assumptions then about how might you assess that and how might you grade it. What we do in the Ripen platform as well is give you the ability to create a rubric, including weightings for the different milestones and different components of that total aggregate grade, and then be able to assign those grades within Ripen to compute a final grade, which can then be transferred back by way of the LMS integration to the LMS gradebook. So again, there was a question earlier about LMS integration. It is single sign-on coming in, but also we can send a final grade, which can be calculated based on the rubric back to the LMS gradebook as well. So I think that probably covers most of what was asked as best I can about assessment and endorsement and those kinds of things. The next question that I want to try to answer, this is specific to that Calbright College program. And so Eleanor, I'm going to ask you to speak to this. There's a few different questions about funding for these kinds of paid programs. And there are several questions about cost in general, and I'll cover that in a minute as well. But Eleanor, I wonder if you can speak to specifically Calbright and where, you mentioned that it's a fully funded program. Where does that funding come from? But also what you've observed more generally for how different kinds of programs that involve students being paid, how those are funded. And also, as you're doing that, everything that we talked about, I think here so far, were fully funded programs, but we also have one that we've recently done at the University of Virginia, where companies were paying half of the students' stipend that they were receiving. So can you speak to the ability to facilitate those kinds of hybrid programs as well?
Yeah, for sure. Just a few things. Just a
Just a
few
couple
things.
things there, about four
Just a couple
questions.
there. Starting with the Calbright program, they have actually funded the small pilot themselves um, to as essentially as a proof of concept. And so it allows their learners to get paid experiences. It allows local employers to take part in a fully funded paid program for the learners as well. We then have a team here at Ripen that support partners like Calbright when we're thinking about what the next steps look like of that program. And so the initial outcomes from this proof of concept are currently being rolled into an RFP process actually for new funding to expand the program in a much larger way. And that's not uncommon in our partnerships at Ripen. Our team will come in and collaborate. We have a lot of relationships with various philanthropic funders, for example, who might be providing funding for a program. And then in other places, more so in Canada than the US currently, some of our government funded programs are either provincial or federally funded, where that funding is coming from a partner. And you can imagine all of the data and the impact storytelling that we're able to do from the platform really supports those cases when we're making applications for funding to look to the impact and the economic impacts of those types of programming. I think the last piece there was about programs where we have kind of a matching program. And so we have a program in Canada called Future Path, and then we also run a program, a relatively small pilot with the University of Virginia, which is called the VTOP program. And both those programs are matching programs where the program is providing 50% of the stipend, but the employer partner is meeting them in the middle and providing the other 50% of the stipend, which goes to the learner. So a little more skin in the game for the employer partner. And we're seeing that be really, really successful. The way that the platform can serve in that circumstance, it then becomes the central payment provider for both parties. So the employer is kind of having their funds directly connected to the Ripen platform. The learner is completing their project. Our team is then validating the completion of that project, looking at the things like the work logs and the employer feedback. And then the learner is getting paid through Ripen, and both of those halves of the payment are kind of coming together through the Ripen system. So there's a lot of different models at play, and we support a lot of our partners to make those applications to private philanthropy funders to bring these programs to life.
I think you got all of those components. Eleanor knows I like to ask three questions in one and see if she's paying attention. So well done. I think I'll close us because we're running out of time. There are a bunch of questions, not surprisingly, just about, well, what does this cost? Whether it is something that you might take to a philanthropist or pay for in another way. The short answer to that question is it depends. It basically depends on how you are using Ripen. So we do license directly with colleges and universities. The cost of that license depends, A, on what your use cases are. Different use cases cost different amounts because we might need more projects or fewer projects. We might need projects that are more difficult to source than others, and so therefore that simply costs more. So it really does depend on what kinds of use cases are we facilitating, and then at what scale. So as many things do, these programs become on a unit basis somewhat less expensive to administer at scale, especially when we are perhaps activating an employer base that's in a particular geography. There's a lot of upfront work that goes into doing that. And then once it has been done, and now we are matching additional projects at increasing volumes, that becomes somewhat more cost effective over time to do. So that's a long way of saying that it depends. And every proposal we put together is based on a really deep understanding of what are you trying to accomplish, what are your use cases, and then that boils down to, at the end of the day, a per learner experience cost. Where that actual rate depends on all of those factors. So what I would encourage you to do is get in touch with us and follow up, and we can chat more about what specifically you might be thinking of doing, and begin to give some indicative costs for what kind of range might that entail, working toward putting a proposal together. The last thing I will say, there were a few questions about this. We've worked with several institutions that have taken proposals and brought those to a benefactor. So on all of your campuses, you have advancement folks that are asking benefactors to make donations. If you have benefactors that are particularly interested in funding career preparedness kinds of initiatives. Maybe you have benefactors that are already supporting internships for students to do an internship, maybe with a nonprofit that can't afford to pay them. Those are good places to start to think about. If a benefactor is already supporting an initiative like that, maybe they would want to support a different kind of career-focused experiential learning initiative. And those can be scenarios where we can prepare a proposal that lays out different use cases that you might take to a benefactor. So we're happy to have those kinds of collaborative conversations and try to put those kinds of things together. So we're just about at time. I want to thank everybody for joining and for your engagement today. A lot of great questions came in. I think we answered as many as we could. There are some that I don't think we were able to get to, but we've used every minute that we had to try. So thank you for being patient as you were submitting questions. The QR code here on the screen you can scan, and that will allow you to get in contact with us. So please do follow up. I think we'll be sending the recording of this session out, so feel free to get in touch with us via email and follow up to that. And happy to show you a more individualized demo for one thing, but also talk, as we mentioned, about the use cases that you might have in mind and what might that cost working toward putting a proposal together. So thank you again for joining us here this afternoon. Thank you, Eleanor, for joining me and facilitating this session. And we hope everybody has a terrific rest of your day.
Thanks so much, folks.